"Uncle, I know how to save your daughter," said the poor boy to the millionaire. Desperation was etched across Richard Thompson's face. The man, known for his technology empire and cold business demeanor, was now breaking down in tears as doctors rushed in all directions. His only daughter, Emma, just 12 years old, had been hospitalized with mysterious symptoms that left the best specialists in the country at a loss. That's when he felt a light touch on his arm. Turning around, he saw a boy who couldn't have been more than 14 years old. He wore a faded Chicago Cubs t-shirt, worn denim shorts and flip-flops. His eyes, however, shone with disconcerting intensity. "You're the father of the girl in room 507, right?" asked the boy with a strong South Side accent. Richard frowned, ready to call security. How did this boy know where his daughter was? "Uncle, I know how to save your daughter," said the boy before Richard could respond. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Richard reacted with suspicion. "My name is Michael. I work here. I mean, not officially. I do odd jobs for Miss Betty, from housekeeping. But I hear things, I see things, and I know what your daughter has." Richard looked around, searching for security personnel, but something in the boy's gaze made him hesitate. "Your daughter fainted during a school trip to the Botanical Gardens after drinking water from a bottle that wasn't hers, right?" Michael continued. The businessman froze. That detail hadn't been disclosed. Only he, the driver, and the doctors knew. "How did you—" "And now she has a fever that comes and goes, spots on her legs that appear and disappear, and the doctors think it's autoimmune, but it's not," Michael completed with disturbing confidence. Richard grabbed the boy's arm, with enough force to make him wince, but not cry out. "Who sent you here? Are you spying on me?" Richard's voice came through clenched teeth. "Nobody sent me, I swear," Michael answered without breaking eye contact. "I have a gift, always have. I see what others don't see, I feel what others don't feel. My grandma said it was a gift from God, but here at the hospital they call me nosy." Richard released the boy's arm, confused. He was exhausted after 3 days without proper sleep, worried about Emma's condition. "And what do you think you know about my daughter's illness?" he finally asked. "It's not what I think, it's what I know," Michael corrected. "Your daughter was poisoned, but not on purpose. It's the new medicine she's taking for allergies. The medicine her doctor prescribed. He didn't know, it's not his fault." Richard felt his blood run cold. Emma had indeed started treatment for respiratory allergies just over a month ago. "How do you know this?" Richard's voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Because of Miss Nancy. She was the head nurse here until last month. She was fired because she discovered that this medicine was hurting a lot of people, especially children. She tried to warn them, but nobody would listen." Richard looked around again, checking if anyone was watching them. "And where is this Miss Nancy now?" "She lives in Brighton Park on the south side. I can take you to her, but it has to be now before—" Michael stopped talking abruptly, his eyes fixed on a point behind Richard. "Mr. Thompson, is everything all right?" It was Dr. Wilson returning with a clipboard. "Is this boy bothering you?" Richard hesitated for a moment, looking from Michael to the doctor. "No, doctor, everything's fine. He just offered me coffee." Dr. Wilson narrowed his eyes at Michael. "You shouldn't be here, boy. The junior volunteers only come on Wednesdays and Saturdays." Michael lowered his head in submission. "Sorry, doctor, I'm going now." Before walking away, however, the boy turned to Richard and whispered, "I'll be outside at the bus stop. If you want to know more, meet me there in an hour." Richard watched the boy walk away, while the doctor continued talking about new tests and international specialists who could be consulted. But his mind was elsewhere. What if this strange boy was right? What if there was something the doctors weren't seeing? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. An hour later, Richard found himself at the bus stop in front of the hospital, feeling completely out of place in his Italian suit. People stared at him, probably recognizing him from business magazines and society columns. Michael was there, as promised, sharing a package of cookies with a skinny dog. "I thought you wouldn't come," said the boy, jumping up. "I don't know why I'm here," Richard replied honestly. "I'm probably making a mistake. No, you're not, but we need to hurry. There's a bus that passes in 5 minutes to Brighton Park. Richard laughed in disbelief. Bus? I don't take buses, kid. And how do you plan to get there? Will your driver take you to the south side without asking questions? Or would you prefer to call a taxi and let more people know where you're going? Richard realized the boy was right. If there really was something strange happening with Emma's treatment, he needed to be discreet. Besides, his daughter was stable, sedated for tests. He had a few hours before she woke up. All right, he agreed reluctantly, but I hope this Miss Nancy of yours really knows something. The journey to Brighton Park was a surreal experience for Richard. The crowded bus, the heat, the jolts. He felt observed, vulnerable, but at the same time anonymous. Nobody there seemed to care who he was or how much money he had. He watched Michael interacting naturally with some people, greeting them, asking about family members. The boy seemed to know half the city. How did you meet this Miss Nancy? Richard asked, when they found 2 empty seats at the back of the bus. She took care of my mom when I was 8. My mom had problems. Michael hesitated. Problems with drinking and other things. Miss Nancy was always nice. Would give me food when I was waiting at the hospital. After my mom passed, I kept going there sometimes to earn a few bucks and get something to eat. That's when I met Miss Betty, who let me help with cleaning. You live alone? Richard asked, realizing he had never talked so much with someone from such a different reality. I live with my Aunt Judy and 5 cousins, but it's like living alone, Michael shrugged. She works in 2 family homes and only comes back to sleep. The older ones have their own lives. Only little Peter, who's 6, pays attention to me. Richard nodded, not knowing what to say. He thought of Emma, in her huge room in the Lincoln Park mansion, with all the toys and technology money could buy. Even so, she often said she felt lonely. They got off the bus on a busy avenue. Michael guided Richard through increasingly narrow streets until they reached a simple house with a low brick wall and a small, well-tended garden. It's here, said Michael, clapping at the gate. Miss Nancy, it's Michael. A black woman with grey hair tied in a bun appeared at the door. She wore a simple printed dress and slippers. Her face lit up when she saw Michael, but her expression changed to suspicion when she noticed Richard. Michael, boy, what are you up to and who is this man? Miss Nancy, this is Uncle Richard. He needs your help. His daughter is sick at Northwestern Memorial with the same symptoms as those other cases you discovered. The woman's expression changed instantly. She looked from side to side as if checking if they were being watched, and then opened the gate wider. Come in quickly. It's not safe to talk out here. The house inside was small but impeccably clean and organized. Family photos decorated the walls, along with some framed certificates. Miss Nancy led them to a small living room with a floral fabric sofa and a shelf with a television. Please, sit down, she said to Richard, who obeyed, feeling uncomfortable. On the low sofa, Miss Nancy, I'm sorry to bother you, but this boy says you know something about what might be happening to my daughter. Michael tends to know things, she replied enigmatically. Tell me about your daughter. What are the symptoms? Richard described in detail what had happened to Emma in the last few days, the sudden fainting, the intermittent fever, the strange spots that appeared and disappeared, the extreme fatigue, the joint pain. And yes, he confirmed that she had started taking a new medication for allergies called Respiraclear. Miss Nancy's face turned serious. That's exactly what I feared, she said, getting up and going to a small adjacent office. She returned with their folder. 3 months ago, we started receiving at Northwestern Memorial several patients, mainly children and adolescents, with similar symptoms. At first, the cases seemed isolated, but I began to notice a pattern. They had all started treatment with Respiraclear between 1 and 2 months before the symptoms appeared. And what did the doctors say? Asked Richard, leaning forward. The doctors didn't see the connection. The cases were attended by different specialists at different times, but I, as the head nurse of pediatrics, saw all of them. When I put the data together and presented it to Dr. Wilson, he said it was coincidence, that I didn't have enough training to make such claims. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. He knew this type of arrogance well. And what happened next? I insisted, of course. I went to the administrative director, Dr. Campbell. I showed him my records. He promised to investigate, but nothing happened. A week later, I was called to HR. They said there were staff cuts, restructuring. After 28 years at the hospital, they fired me with minimal compensation and a cold thank you. Richard felt anger growing inside him. This story sounded very familiar in the corporate world he lived in. Do you have proof? Documents? Records? I have copies of everything. She opened the folder, showing files, tables, meticulous notes. But nobody wants to listen to a retired nurse against a pharmaceutical giant. Richard took the folder and quickly leafed through it. The numbers were alarming. More than 30 cases in 3 months, just at Northwestern Memorial. And which company manufactures this medication? Progress Pharmaceuticals, a subsidiary of Vital Pharma. Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Vital Pharma was one of the companies in the TechLife Group, of which he was president and major shareholder. The acquisition had been made just a year ago, a diversification recommended by the board. "Are you all right?" asked Miss Nancy, noticing Richard's sudden paleness. "Yes, I just need to make some calls," he replied, trying to maintain his composure. "Would you allow me to borrow this folder?" "You can take it. I have other copies stored in safe places." She smiled slightly. "I learned to protect myself after what happened." Richard thanked her and stood up. Michael, who had been quietly listening to everything in the kitchen while eating a piece of cake offered by Ms. Nancy, approached. "So, Uncle, are we going to save your daughter now?" The simplicity of the question contrasted with the complexity of the situation. Richard looked at the boy, at Ms. Nancy, and then at the folder in his hands. What he would do next could destroy part of the empire he had built, but Emma's life was at stake, and possibly that of many other children. "Yes, Michael, we're going to save my daughter and maybe many others." On the way back to the hospital, Richard made several calls, first to his ex-wife, Laura, who had been living in New York since the divorce 3 years ago. She was shocked by the news and promised to catch the first flight to Chicago. Then he called his personal lawyer, Lawrence, asking him to urgently gather independent experts in toxicology and pharmacology. "I want them to investigate everything about Respiraclear," he instructed. "Side effects, clinical trials, FDA approval, everything, and with absolute discretion." Finally, he called Megan, his personal assistant, asking her to cancel all his appointments for the next few days and not to comment to anyone in the office about the real reasons. Michael observed everything attentively, impressed with the change in Richard's posture. The man who had earlier seemed broken by despair was now acting with determination. "You really are important, huh?" commented the boy as they returned to the hospital in a taxi. "I'm just a man trying to save his daughter," replied Richard, looking out the window. After a moment he added, "But yes, I have resources, and I'll use them all if necessary." Back at the hospital, Richard went straight to the pediatric ICU where Emma was hospitalized. Dr. Wilson intercepted him in the corridor. "Mr. Thompson, we were concerned. You left without notice." "I had to resolve some urgent matters, Doctor." Richard cut him off. "How is my daughter?" "Stable, but without significant improvement," replied the doctor. "We're considering starting a new treatment with more potent immunosuppressants, based on the hypothesis of autoimmune disease." Richard took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. Now he knew that this treatment could make Emma's condition even worse. "Doctor, I want to immediately suspend the use of Respiraclear." The doctor seemed surprised. "The antihistamine? But it has no relation to the current condition. It's just for controlling the previous allergy." "Even so, I want to suspend it," insisted Richard. "And I do not authorize the start of any immunosuppressive treatment until we have more conclusive results." Dr. Wilson frowned, visibly annoyed. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, you don't have medical training to—" "No, I don't," interrupted Richard. "But I've hired a team of independent specialists who will arrive tomorrow for a second opinion. Until then, only supportive treatments. And I want the complete medical records and results of all tests to send to them today." The doctor paled slightly. "As you wish. It's your right to seek a second opinion. I'll provide copies of the documents." When the doctor walked away, Michael, who had been waiting discreetly at the end of the corridor, approached. "You were awesome. Did you see his face?" he commented, with an admiring smile. "Michael, I need you to stay away for now," said Richard in a low voice. "Things are going to get complicated, and I don't want you to be more involved." The boy's smile disappeared. "But I was the one who helped you. I want to see the girl get better." "I know, and I'm very grateful, but now it's dangerous. I promise I'll keep you informed." Michael crossed his arms, displeased. "I don't trust the doctors here. They'll try to fool you again." Richard thought for a moment. "Do you have a phone? Some way for me to contact you?" "I have an old cell phone my aunt gave me. It only works for calls." Michael wrote the number on a piece of paper. Richard put it in his pocket. "I'll call you tomorrow to tell you the progress, okay? Now, I need to be with my daughter." Reluctantly, Michael agreed and walked away. Richard watched him leave the hospital, wondering how such a young boy could be so perceptive and brave. In the next 2 days, the situation evolved rapidly. The team of independent specialists led by Dr. Catherine Vance, a renowned toxicologist from Stanford, confirmed the suspicions. Respiraclear contained a compound that, in certain patients with genetic predisposition, could cause a severe autoimmune reaction. It was exactly what was happening to Emma. Laura arrived from New York and, after the initial shock of learning about the situation, joined forces with Richard. Despite the turbulent divorce, they had always been united when it came to their daughter. "How did we not notice this before?" lamented Laura, as they watched Emma sleeping already with the correct treatment initiated. "We're her parents. We should have protected her." "We trusted the doctors, the laboratories, the system," replied Richard, feeling the weight of guilt. "I never imagined something like this could happen." "Richard," said Laura hesitantly, "your lawyer told me about the connection with Vital Pharma." He nodded, tense. Lawrence had confirmed the worst. Progress Pharmaceuticals had omitted important data during the clinical trials of Respiraclear, presenting only favorable results to the FDA. More seriously, they had identified the potential problem, but decided to proceed, calculating that the number of adverse cases would be small enough not to significantly affect profits. "I've already initiated procedures to remove the entire board of Vital Pharma," said Richard, "and I've ordered the immediate recall of Respiraclear from the market." "This will cost you millions," observed Laura. "I don't care," he replied sincerely. "No amount of money is worth Emma's life, or any other child's." On the morning of the 3rd day, when Emma began to show the first signs of improvement, Richard received an alarming call from Ms. Nancy. "Mr. Richard, Michael is missing," she said, her voice trembling. "His aunt came looking for me. He didn't come home last night." Richard felt a chill. He immediately thought of calling the number Michael had given him, but Ms. Nancy had already tried unsuccessfully. "Does he usually disappear like this?" "Sometimes he spends the night on the street, when he fights with his aunt, but he always shows up here or at the hospital in the morning. I'm afraid that," she hesitated, "that someone found out he talked to you." Richard promised to help and hung up. He looked at Laura, who could see the concern on his face. "What is it?" she asked. "Remember that boy I told you about?" "He's disappeared," Laura frowned. "Do you think it's related to all this?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Richard asked Lawrence to hire private investigators to look for Michael. He also contacted Jennifer Parker, a respected investigative journalist with whom he had maintained good relations over the years, despite some critical pieces she had written about his companies. "I need your help, Jennifer, but I can't explain. Everything over the phone. It's about a case of corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and a missing boy." "Sounds like the type of story that interests me," replied the journalist. "Where do we meet?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer and Richard met at a cafe in a neutral hotel, away from the hospital and the business center. He told her everything about Emma, about Respiraclear, about Ms. Nancy, and especially about Michael. "This boy risked a lot to help me," concluded Richard. "And now I fear he's in danger because of it." Jennifer took notes throughout the account, occasionally asking incisive questions. "Do you have proof of all this? Of the data manipulation, the nurse's unfair dismissal?" Richard handed her a folder with copies of everything he had gathered, including the reports from the independent specialists and internal documents from Vital Pharma that his legal team had managed to access. "I'm willing to go public with all of this," he said, "but first I need to find Michael." "I understand your concern," said Jennifer, leafing through the documents, "and I confess, I'm impressed with your attitude. It's not common to see a businessman of your caliber exposing problems in his own company." "This stopped being about business the moment I saw my daughter in that hospital bed," replied Richard, serious. "And it got worse when I realized that other children, without the resources I have, might be suffering the same or worse." Jennifer nodded. "I'll publish a preliminary article tomorrow, without mentioning the boy yet, so as not to put him at more risk. But I'll use my contacts to try to locate him. Thank you. And there's one more thing I'd like to ask." "What?" "I want to hire Ms. Nancy as a consultant for a new project, an independent watchdog institute for medications and treatments. Do you think she would accept?" Jennifer smiled for the first time during the conversation. "You really have changed, haven't you, Thompson? But yes, I believe she would accept, especially if it means other children won't go through what your daughter went through." Upon returning to the hospital, Richard found Laura in the corridor, with a worried expression. "What is it? Did Emma get worse?" he asked, alarmed. "No, she's stable. But Dr. Wilson came with a strange document, an authorization for an experimental procedure that he says is crucial. When I questioned him, he became evasive and said he'd return when you were present." Richard felt anger growing again. "Where is he now?" "He was called for an emergency, said he'd be back in an hour." Richard went straight to Emma's room. The girl was sleeping, more color in her face than in previous days. Her heartbeat and other vital signs were better. He held her small hand in his, feeling a wave of love and protection. Dr. Wilson appeared almost 2 hours later, accompanied by another doctor Richard didn't know. "Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Amanda Ferris, a specialist in pediatric immunology. She's proposing an innovative treatment that can significantly accelerate Emma's recovery." The doctor, a young woman with a serious expression, greeted Richard and Laura with a brief nod. "Your daughter's condition is more complex than it appears," she said. "The damage caused by Respiraclear may be permanent if we don't act quickly. With this protocol." She extended a document of several pages. Richard took it but didn't immediately start reading. "Dr. Ferris, how long have you worked at this hospital? I've never seen you before." "I'm an external consultant," she replied, a little uncomfortable. "I was called especially for this case." "Called by whom?" Dr. Wilson intervened. "By me, naturally. I know Dr. Ferris's work from international conferences." Richard exchanged a look with Laura, who seemed equally suspicious. "And this treatment, has it been tested on other patients with a reaction to Respiraclear?" "It's a new protocol," admitted Dr. Ferris, "but the laboratory results are promising." Richard leafed through the document, paying attention to the details. In small print on the last page, he found what he feared. The laboratory responsible for the experimental protocol was a subsidiary of Vital Pharma, the same group that produced Respiraclear. "Do you really think I'm going to authorize the same company that poisoned my daughter to now use her as a guinea pig?" said Richard, his voice calm but carrying contained fury. Dr. Wilson paled. Dr. Ferris maintained her composure, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. "Mr. Thompson, there's a misunderstanding. This protocol—" "There is no misunderstanding," interrupted Richard. "I want both of you to leave this room now. Starting tomorrow, my daughter will have a new medical team in another hospital." "That's precipitous," protested Dr. Wilson. "The transfer now would be an unnecessary risk." "The biggest risk to my daughter is doctors committed to interests other than just her health," replied Richard. "Please leave before I call security." When the doctors left, Laura looked at Richard with an expression that mixed surprise and admiration. "I've never seen you like this, so protective." "I've never seen myself like this," he admitted. "I think I'm learning from a certain 14-year-old boy." That night, while Laura stayed with Emma, Richard returned to his apartment for a quick shower and change of clothes. He had barely entered when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello." "Mr. Thompson, The voice on the other end was young, female, and frightened. "Yes, who's speaking? My name is Jessica. I'm Michael's friend. He asked me to call from this payphone if he didn't show up by today." Richard felt his heart race. "Do you know where he is?" "I'm not sure, but—" The voice hesitated. "He said he was going to sneak into Northwestern Memorial last night. He wanted to get some paper from the bald doctor's office. Said it was important to help the rich girl." "Bald doctor? You mean Dr. Wilson?" "That's the one. Michael said he saw him, keeping some strange papers after talking to a man in a suit who wasn't a doctor. Said it had to do with the girl and with other sick children." Richard felt a chill. "Jessica, I need you to tell me exactly where you are. I'm going to send someone to pick you up right now." 20 minutes later, a car was taking Jessica to Richard's apartment. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, seemed scared and impressed by the luxury of the place. "Michael said you were rich, but I didn't imagine it was this much," she commented, looking around. "Jessica, I need you to tell me everything Michael said before disappearing," asked Richard, ignoring the comment. The girl took a deep breath. "Michael's always been kind of weird, you know. He says he sees things, that he feels things. At first I thought he was lying, but then he's always right. He always knows when someone is lying, when something is wrong." "He has a gift," agreed Richard, remembering Michael's own words. "Yeah, and ever since that nurse, Ms. Nancy, was fired, he's been obsessed with the sick children. Said there was something wrong with a new medicine. Nobody paid attention to him, you know. Who's going to believe a street kid? Then he saw your daughter arrive and said it was his chance to prove he was right. And what happened yesterday? He found me in the park and was all excited. Said you had believed him, that you had taken him seriously. But he was also worried. Said he heard the bald doctor talking on the phone about hiding evidence and silencing the nurse for good." Richard felt a knot in his stomach. "And he decided to enter the hospital to get this evidence?" "Yes, he knows all the entrances and exits there. He's slept hidden in the hospital several times. Said he would enter through the laundry, then go up the service elevator to the 3rd floor, where the doctor's office is." "And why didn't he come to me before doing this?" Jessica shrugged. "Michael's like that, acts on his own, but he made me promise that if he didn't come back by this afternoon, I should call you and tell you everything." Richard picked up the phone and called Lawrence. "I need you to come here now and bring that friend of yours from the FBI. We have a situation." While they waited, Richard offered food to Jessica, who accepted without hesitation. Watching her eat voraciously, he wondered how many meals the girl usually skipped. He thought of Michael, his determination and courage, how he risked everything to help a girl he didn't even know, and now possibly was in danger because of it. Lawrence arrived accompanied by Agent Robert Dawson, a serious middle-aged man. Richard told them everything from the beginning. "We have reason to believe that this boy, Michael, is missing because he discovered evidence of fraud in the approval of Respiraclear," he concluded. "And he's possibly being held somewhere against his will." The agent listened attentively, taking notes. "This is serious, Thompson. We're talking about a possible criminal concealment of side effects of a medication, fraud in clinical trials, and now kidnapping of a minor. If all this is true, a lot of people are going down." "I don't care who goes down as long as we find Michael and other children aren't harmed," replied Richard. "I have resources, I have evidence, and I'm willing to go all the way with this." "We need to act with caution," pondered Robert. "If we go in head first, they might get rid of evidence, or worse if the boy really is with them." Richard understood the implication and felt a chill. "What do you suggest?" "A coordinated operation, hospital, vital pharma headquarters, residences of the main people involved, all at the same time. But I need a warrant, and for that, I need to present concrete evidence to a judge." "We have the evidence," assured Richard. "Internal company documents, Ms. Nancy's testimony, the reports from independent specialists, and now Jessica's testimony about Michael's last words." The agent nodded. "I'll activate my team and talk to the duty judge. With luck, we'll get the warrants today and operate at dawn tomorrow." When Robert and Lawrence left to begin preparations, Richard turned his attention to Jessica. "You were very brave to come looking for me," he said. "I can arrange for you to stay in a safe place until we resolve this." Jessica shook her head. "I need to go back. My grandma will be worried if I don't show up to sleep. And if Michael comes back, he'll look for me there. I understand. But promise me you'll be careful and call me immediately if you hear anything about Michael. The girl promised. Richard sent his driver to take her home with instructions to ensure she arrived safely. Back at the hospital, Richard found Emma awake, talking to her mother. Seeing his daughter conscious and speaking, albeit with a weak voice, brought a wave of relief that almost made him cry. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, opening a tired smile. Richard carefully hugged his daughter so as not to disturb the tubes and sensors still connected to her. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Tired, and with a hunger that never ends," she replied, bringing smiles to both parents. "Mom said we're going to another hospital tomorrow. Why?" Richard exchanged a look with Laura before answering. "It's just so you can have even better doctors, dear. Doctors who will ensure you get well as quickly as possible." Emma seemed to accept the explanation. After a few minutes of talking about light topics, she suddenly became serious. "Dad, Mum told me that a boy helped discover what was wrong with me. Is that true?" Richard hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to frighten Emma with the full story. "Yes, it's true, a very special and brave boy named Michael. I would like to meet him to thank him," said Emma sincerely. "He saved my life, didn't he?" "In a way, yes," replied Richard, feeling a lump in his throat. "And I promise I'll find him so you can meet." Later, when Emma fell asleep again, Richard told Laura about Michael's disappearance and the operation planned for the next day. "My God, Richard, this is much bigger than we imagined," she said, shocked. "Do you think they would really harm a street boy?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking the risk. Agent Dawson is competent and discreet. If Michael is somewhere in the hospital or on Vital Pharma properties, they'll find him. And if they don't?" Richard had no answer for that. The thought that Michael might be— No, he couldn't even consider that possibility. "We'll find him," he stated, with more conviction than he actually felt. The dawn was long and tense. Richard received a call from Robert, confirming that the warrants had been issued and that the operation would begin at 5 a.m. He decided not to try to sleep. Instead, he stayed by Emma's bed, watching over her sleep and thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days. How had his life changed so drastically in such a short time? A week ago, he was just a successful businessman concerned with acquisitions, mergers, and the value of his company's shares. Now he was in the middle of a criminal investigation, about to expose corrupt practices in one of his own companies, and desperately worried about a street boy he had met just 4 days ago. At 4:30, he received a message from Robert asking him to discreetly leave the hospital with Emma and Laura before the operation began. A private ambulance was already waiting for them to transfer to Mayo Clinic, where a trusted team was ready to receive Emma. The transfer occurred without problems. At 5 o'clock sharp, when the ambulance was already on its way to the airport, from where a private jet would take them to Rochester, Minnesota, Richard received confirmation that the operation had begun simultaneously at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, at Vital Pharma headquarters in Chicago, and at the residences of Dr. Wilson, Dr. Campbell, and the Director of Progress Pharmaceuticals. "Keep me informed of any developments," Richard asked Robert, "especially about Michael." "I will," promised the agent. "Now focus on your daughter. Leave the rest to us." On the flight to Rochester, Emma slept most of the time, still exhausted by what her body had gone through. Laura alternated between moments of relief at seeing her daughter improving and concern about the whole situation. "What will happen to your companies after all this?" she asked at one point. "Won't this destroy everything you've built?" Richard reflected for a moment. "Maybe it will destroy part of it. Certainly the stocks will fall when the story becomes public. But I'm willing to rebuild, differently this time. More ethical, more conscious." Laura observed him with curiosity. "That's not what you told me when I asked you to work less and spend more time with us. You said it was impossible to build an empire by being nice." "I was wrong," admitted Richard, "and you were right. Maybe if I had listened to you, we would still be together." "Let's not go down that road now," said Laura, looking away. "It's too late for us." "I know. I'm just noting that I've learned some hard lessons in the last few days. The silence that followed was interrupted by the ring of Richard's phone. It was Robert. "Thompson, we found Michael." Richard felt his heart race. "Where? How is he?" "He was locked in a file room in the hospital basement. He's dehydrated and scared. But other than that, he seems fine. We found him thanks to a cleaning lady who heard knocking coming from inside the room." Richard closed his eyes, feeling a wave of relief so intense it almost made him cry. "Thank God, can I speak to him?" "Not now. He's being examined by doctors and then will be formally interviewed since he's a key witness. But he asked about you and your daughter. He seems really concerned about her. Tell him Emma is fine and that she really wants to meet him, and that as soon as all this is over, I'll return to speak with him personally." "I will." "Oh, and Thompson, we found the documents he mentioned. Michael managed to hide them inside his own clothes before being discovered. They're internal test records that clearly show Progress Pharmaceuticals knew about the serious side effects of Respiraclear in at least 2% of patients, but concealed this information from the FDA. And what about those involved? Dr. Wilson is detained as well, as Dr. Campbell and 3 vital pharma executives. We're tracking emails and calls. The conspiracy seems extensive." Richard thanked him and hung up. He looked at Laura, who had listened attentively. "They found him," she said with a relieved smile. "This boy really is special, isn't he?" "More than we can imagine," agreed Richard. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the weeks that followed, the case gained national proportions. Jennifer Parker published a series of reports detailing the Respiraclear scandal, revealing how a medication with serious side effects had been approved through manipulated tests and influence over doctors and authorities. The story of Michael, the street boy who had helped unmask the scheme, moved the country. Emma fully recovered after 3 weeks of treatment at Mayo Clinic. When she was discharged, the first thing she asked was to meet Michael. Richard had maintained contact with the boy by phone, ensuring he was well cared for while the case unfolded. The meeting between Emma and Michael took place in the garden of Richard's Lincoln Park mansion. The girl, still a bit pale but with eyes bright with curiosity, watched the boy who approached timidly, accompanied by Miss Nancy. "So you're Michael," said Emma, extending her hand. "The boy who saved my life." Michael blushed, uncomfortable with the recognition. "I just did what anyone would do," he replied, accepting the greeting. "No, you did what few would have the courage to do," corrected Richard, approaching. "You risked your own safety to help someone you didn't even know." "And for that I ended up locked in a basement," joked Michael, now more at ease. "But it was worth it. You look much better than the last time I saw you." Emma smiled. "I'm almost as good as new. The doctors said if the treatment had been delayed a few more weeks, it could have been much worse." The conversation flowed naturally. Emma wanted to know everything about how Michael had discovered the connection with Respiraclear, about his gift, about his life at the hospital. Michael, in turn, was fascinated with Emma's books and knowledge. While the children talked, Richard spoke with Ms. Nancy about the Pharmaceutical Vigilance Institute he was structuring. "I want you to be the director of operations," he said. "No one knows the hospital backstage and the warning signs we should watch for better than you." "It's a tempting proposal, Mr. Richard," replied Ms. Nancy, "but I don't have academic training for such an important position. You have something much more valuable, experience and integrity. The Institute will have PhDs and specialists for the technical part, but it needs someone like you to guide them in what really matters, patient safety." After some hesitation, Ms. Nancy accepted. Her first suggestion was that the Institute create a program to identify and support children like Michael, who demonstrated special talents for observation and connecting facts. These young people would be the eyes of the healthcare system in the most vulnerable communities, she explained. Places where problems are often ignored or hidden. Richard immediately agreed. The idea fit perfectly with his new vision about the role of his companies in society. Meanwhile, Vital Pharma was undergoing a complete restructuring. All executives involved in the scandal were fired and faced criminal charges. Richard appointed a new board, composed mainly of doctors with impeccable ethical backgrounds. with the mission of reviewing all the company's products and establishing new testing and approval protocols more rigorous than those required by the FDA. The financial cost was immense. TechLife Group shares initially plummeted, and several contracts were cancelled. But Richard did not regret it for a moment. Emma's life was saved, other children would not be exposed to Respiraclear, and he had found a new purpose. Laura, surprisingly, decided to postpone her return to New York. The experience of almost losing her daughter and seeing Richard's transformation made her reconsider some choices. Not that there was any possibility of romantic reconciliation, that chapter was definitely closed, but a new form of partnership in raising Emma was beginning to take shape. Emma, for her part, developed an unlikely friendship with Michael. Despite the social differences and life experiences, they found common ground. Both were observant, sensitive, and, in a way, lonely in their worlds. Richard hired private tutors for Michael, who demonstrated sharp intelligence and thirst for knowledge. A month after Emma's discharge, Richard received a phone call from Robert, the FBI agent. Thompson, the testimonies of the arrested executives are revealing a much larger conspiracy than we imagined. There are indications that at least 3 other recently approved medications followed the same pattern of test manipulation and co-optation of authorities. "Which medications?" asked Richard, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We are verifying that now, but I wanted to inform you that your name has been completely cleared from the investigations. It became clear that you had no knowledge of what was happening behind the scenes at Vital Pharma." "That doesn't exempt me from moral responsibility," replied Richard. "I was the group's president. I should have supervised the operations better." "Well, your attitude upon discovering the problem compensated for any previous negligence. How many CEOs do you know who would risk their own fortune to denounce illegal practices in their companies?" Richard didn't respond directly. Instead, he asked, "What's Michael's legal situation now? I'm concerned about his long-term welfare." "That's another thing I wanted to talk about. His aunt was interviewed and, well, she didn't show much interest in resuming custody. In fact, she seemed relieved to have one less mouth to feed." "That's terrible," commented Richard, although not totally surprised, based on what Michael had told about his family situation. "Yes, but it also opens possibilities." The juvenile court judge indicated he would look favorably on a request for temporary guardianship, given the bond Michael has established with your family and the role he played in saving your daughter. Richard felt an unexpected emotion upon hearing this. The idea of becoming responsible for Michael had not consciously crossed his mind, but now that Robert mentioned it, it seemed natural. Would that really be possible? With my recent history involved in this scandal. Actually, your recent history is precisely what makes the judge favorable. You demonstrated that you place principles above financial interests and that you have a genuine commitment to the child's welfare, since you've been financing his studies and medical care. Richard promised to seriously consider the idea and discuss it with Laura and, of course, with Michael himself. It wouldn't be a decision to be made impulsively. That night, after dinner, Richard found Emma and Michael in the mansion's library. Michael was reading aloud from an astronomy book, while Emma took notes in a notebook. Both were so absorbed they didn't notice his presence. "The universe is much larger than we can imagine," Michael was saying, with genuine admiration. "Billions. Of galaxies, each with billions of stars. And most of those stars have planets orbiting around them like Earth," added Emma. "There are probably millions of planets where there could be life." Richard observed them for a few minutes, impressed with the naturalness of the interaction. Emma had always been a reserved child, having difficulty making friends at the elite school she attended. Seeing her talking animatedly with Michael, sharing knowledge and curiosities, was a revelation. "So, what are you two up to?" he finally asked, entering the library. Both turned, smiles lighting up their faces. "Dad!" exclaimed Emma. "Michael is helping me with my science project. We're going to build a model of the solar system that shows the orbits to scale." "Impressive," replied Richard, sitting in a nearby armchair. "Seems like you two make a good team." Michael smiled shyly, still not entirely comfortable with compliments. Emma is very smart, Mr. Richard. She understands things faster than I do. That's not true, protested Emma. You picked up in 2 days things that took me months to learn at school. Richard observed the dynamic between them with curiosity. There was a genuine connection, a mutual respect, rare among children, that age. Michael, said Richard after a moment of hesitation, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Something important. The boy straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. Is it about the hospital? Did they discover something else? No, it's not about that, it's about you, actually. Emma, sensing the serious tone, closed her notebook. Do you want me to leave, Dad? No, sweetheart, you can stay. In fact, this concerns you, too. Richard took a deep breath and then explained the situation. How Michael's aunt had given up custody, how the judge was open to the idea of temporary guardianship, and how he, Richard, was seriously considering taking on that responsibility. But I would only do it if you wanted to, Michael, he concluded. It's a big decision that would change your life. You would come to live here, continue studying with private tutors, and later, when you were ready, you could attend the same school as Emma. Michael was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he asked, Would I be like your son? The question caught Richard by surprise. He hadn't thought exactly in those terms. Well, legally I would be your guardian. More like her tutor. But in practice, Richard hesitated, realizing the importance of the moment. Yes, it would be like a son, with all the responsibilities and privileges that implies. Michael's eyes filled with tears, which he tried to hide by lowering his head. I never had a real father, he murmured. My mum said he left before I was born. Richard stood up and approached the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know I can't replace your biological father, Michael, nor do I intend to, but I can offer a home, education, and a chance for you to develop all your extraordinary potential. This, I promise. Emma, who had observed everything in silence, suddenly hugged Michael. Say yes, Michael. It would be amazing to have you here. It would be like having a brother. Michael looked at Richard, still hesitant. And Miss Nancy? She's been taking care of me since all this started. Miss Nancy is aware of everything, assured Richard. In fact, she was the one who suggested I consider making the situation official. She will continue to be present in your life, of course. I've already invited her to be your educational tutor, in addition to her responsibilities. At the Institute. Michael smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. So she approves? Completely. She said you deserve a chance that she could never give you alone. The boy was silent again, processing everything. Finally, he raised, his eyes looking directly at Richard. I accept, Mr. Richard, but with one condition. What? That you let me help at the Institute too. I want to find other children like me whom nobody listens to. I want them to have a chance too. Richard smiled, touched by the generosity of the boy, who, even having so little, thought of helping others. It's a condition I accept with pleasure. And please, if we're going to be family, you can just call me Richard. In the weeks that followed, life at the Thompson mansion gained a new dynamic. Michael officially moved in, occupying a room next to Emma's. The first days were an adjustment. The boy found the comfort of the soft bed strange, the abundance of food, the silence of the night without sirens or street fights. Laura, who had extended her stay in Chicago, became an important ally in this process. Her sensitivity helped identify the moments when Michael felt overwhelmed by the new reality. It's not just a matter of material comfort, she explained to Richard. It's a whole universe of social rules, expectations, and behaviors. He never had to navigate before. Richard recognized the wisdom in these words. With the help of a child psychologist specialized in family transitions, they established a routine that respected Michael's origins while preparing him for his new social role. The Pharmaceutical Vigilance Institute, named the Michael Thompson Institute, against Michael's own protests, who thought the name exaggerated, began operating 3 months after the RespiraClear scandal. With Ms. Nancy in operational coordination, and a team of independent scientists and doctors, it quickly became a reference in the critical analysis of new medications. In parallel, as promised to Michael, they created the Young Vigilantes program, which identified and trained teenagers from underprivileged communities with an interest in public health. Michael himself actively participated, sharing his experience and inspiring other young people. The relationship between Richard and Laura also evolved into something unexpected. Not a return to marriage, but a partnership based on mutual respect and shared love for Emma, and now for Michael. Laura decided to open a branch of her art gallery in Chicago, which allowed her to spend more time in the US without abandoning her career. "I never imagined we would be here after everything," she commented one night as they watched Emma and Michael swimming in the pool. "A reconfigured family, but still a family." "Life has these things," replied Richard. "Sometimes we need to almost lose everything to find what really matters." A year after the beginning of the whole story, the Respiraclear scandal had resulted in significant changes in the regulatory system for medications in the United States. The FDA implemented more rigorous protocols with greater transparency in approval processes. Vital Pharma, under new management, became a model of pharmaceutical ethics, with smaller profits but restored reputation. Richard, although still at the head of the TechLife Group, devoted a significant portion of his time to the Institute and social causes. The experience with Michael had opened his eyes to realities that, as a businessman focused only on results, he had never really seen. Emma, fully recovered, became a vocal advocate for the cause of safe medications, creating a blog where she shared her experience with other children and adolescents. Her friendship with Michael blossomed into a genuine fraternal relationship, with a typical mix of complicity and teasing between siblings, and Michael, the street boy who had risked everything to save a stranger, found not just a home, but a mission. His exceptional intuition, now supported by formal education and resources, became a powerful tool in identifying patterns and problems that others couldn't see. On a Sunday afternoon, as the family relaxed in the garden after lunch, Michael suddenly became serious and thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" asked Richard, noticing the change in his demeanor. "I was remembering the day I talked to you at the hospital," replied Michael. "That day, I wasn't absolutely certain about the medicine. I had clues, I had suspicions, but not concrete proof. Then why did you risk so much?" Michael smiled with wisdom beyond his years. "Because I saw in your eyes the same thing I saw in mine when I looked in the mirror. Desperation, yes, but also determination. I knew you wouldn't give up until you discovered the truth, if you believed there was a chance to save your daughter." "And you were right," confirmed Richard. "Some people just need a chance, someone who believes in them," continued Michael. "That's what you did for me. You believed when no one else would." Richard reflected on these words. It was true. A year ago, he probably would have ignored a street boy trying to tell him something important. He would have called security, seen only a nuisance, not a person. "I think we both learned important lessons," Richard finally said. "You taught me to see beyond appearances, to listen to voices we normally ignore. And I hope I've shown that. With the right resources, your special intuition can change the world." Michael nodded, visibly moved. Emma, who was listening to the conversation, approached and sat next to him. "You know what I admire most about you, Michael?" she asked. "It's that you never lost your kindness, even having so many reasons to be bitter about life." "Kindness is a choice," Michael replied simply. "My grandma always said that, before she passed away, that we can choose to be hard or gentle no matter what life has given us." Laura, who was joining the group bringing a tray of juices, smiled upon hearing this. Wise words. And to think I went through expensive therapists in New York who didn't reach such profound conclusions. Everyone laughed, and the conversation drifted to lighter topics. But Richard kept that moment in his heart. Kindness is a choice. Simple. Words, but ones that had changed the course of many lives. That poor boy who one day approached a desperate businessman in a hospital corridor not only saved Emma, he had triggered a transformation that spread like waves, from the hospital to the pharmaceutical industry, from the industry to the regulatory system, and most importantly, from the heart of a man who had forgotten what really mattered to the world he now helped transform. As he observed his reconfigured family, Emma and Michael animatedly discussing a new scientific project, Laura sketching something in her drawing pad, Richard felt a deep gratitude. For a moment of madness when he decided to trust a street boy. For a second chance to be the man he always should have been, kindness really was a choice, and he had finally learned to make it. The end of the story. Dear listener, we hope this story has touched your heart. And you, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you needed to trust someone unexpected? Share your experience in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that make a difference.